कलगी वालड़े शहंशाह पिता मेरे चरना तेरे आते नमस्कार सतगुरु। करके मेहर इस डुबदी जाऊंदी नू धक्का मार के लावना पार सतगुरु। दास्तान शहीदां दी लिखने नू दास आपदा होया तैयार सतगुरु। तोड़ चाड़ना अपनी मेहर करके नानक सिंह करे पुकार सतगुरु। ठीक वक्त 5:30 वजे दा सी लोक जमा होए कई हजार प्यारे। कहंदे जिउणा असां दा होया औखा किथे जाई के करिए पुकार प्यारे। अजे लफ्ज तदबीर मुंह विच है सी उधर फौज ने धूड़ तुमा पिछे फौज गोरखे दी जनरल डायर ने अगा वधा दिती। मिंटां विच ही कई हजार गोली उन्हां ज़ालिमां खत्म करा दिती। मिंटां विच ही कई हजार गोली उन्हां ज़ालिमां खत्म करा दिती। पल विच ही लोथां दे ढेर लग गए कोई सके न मूल पछाण उथे। गिनती सिखां दी बहुत ही नजर आवे गिनती सिखां दी बहुत ही नजर आवे भावें बहुत हिंदू मुसलमान उथे। सोने सुर में छैल छबिलड़े जी हाय तड़प दे शेर ਜਵਾਨ ਉਥੇ ਨਾਨਕ ਸਿੰਘ ਨਾ ਪੁੱਛਦਾ ਬਾਤ ਕੋਈ ਰਾਖਾ ਉਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਭਗਵਾਨ ਉਥੇ ਰੋਂਦੇ ਪਿੱਟਦੇ ਲੋਕ ਸੰਬੰਧੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਢੂੰਡਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਮੁਰਦਿਆਂ ਵੱਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਮਾਪੇ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਏ ਵਾਂਗ ਪਤੰਗੇ ਦੇ ਜਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਮਾਪੇ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਏ ਵਾਂਗ ਪਤੰਗੇ ਦੇ ਜਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਮੋਏ ਲਾਡਲੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਪੁੱਤ ਯਾਰੋ ਸੀਨੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਟਾਰਿਆਂ ਸਲੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਪੱਥਰ ਵਾਂਗ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੜੇ ਦਿਲ ਪੱਥਰ ਪੱਥਰ ਵਾਂਗ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੜੇ ਦਿਲ ਪੱਥਰ ਨੀਰ ਉਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਅੱਖੀਓਂ ਚੱਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ मेरे लाल में वारियां जाग छेती मेरे मेरे लाल में वारियां जाग छेती जंगल विच आके कानू सोवणो सी बिना पुछिया लंबड़े राह पियो सानू दस के विदा होवणो सी ओ रता असां दा साथ उड़ीक लैंदो जेकर आ गया सी तेरा कल बच्चा जेकर आ गया सी तेरा कल बच्चा माई बाप नू अगे जा नानक सिंह लिखे नू कौन मिटे नानक सिंह पर लिखे नू कौन मिटे ए हुक्म करतार दा होना सी। Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the royal family of Gondal, Ashish Doshi, Honorary Director, and myself, welcome to India's only surviving opera house. I'm privileged to be the curator of this iconic venue, and for those unfamiliar, this magnificent building was inaugurated in 1911 by King George V and reopened in October of 2016 after being closed for 25 years. Since then, we've made a conscious effort to celebrate our country's diverse arts heritage by lending our stage to bring the traditional and contemporary Indian arts and culture to the city. We're proud to say that over the past 3 years, this opulent venue has come to personify the multicultural and cosmopolitan spirit of our beloved Mumbai. The Royal Opera House has been actively engaged with and supporting festivals across the city and the country since reopening. Today, we're delighted to collaborate with the biggest global literary phenomena, the Jaipur Literature Festival, for the 3rd year in a row. This year also marks Avid Learning's 7th year collaborating with this prestigious festival. We believe that JLF shares many sister concerns and passions for the future trajectory of literature in India and the world, and we are proud to partner and support them each year. Now, I'm going to go off script a bit and tell you that I look forward to JLF every year, and I understand it's difficult to take time off life and work to go attend a cultural festival. I've been doing it for the past 8 years. I only missed 1 year when my daughter was born. But it is my creative sojourn. I mean, the books, the people, the food, the music, the parties. You come back tired but refreshed with new ideas and energy and inspiration. So I urge you all who haven't been there to try and get there. This year means early next year in January. And you will also attend sessions presented by Avid Learning, which has also become some sort of a tradition. And for the first time, the Royal Opera House is going to extend its encouragement beyond the stage by presenting a panel at JLF. So without further ado, Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, Sanjoy K, Teamwork Arts, the Royal Opera House Mumbai, Citibank, and Avid Learning present the Jaipur Literature Festival 2020 Mumbai Preview. Please first welcome Sanjoy K, Managing Director of Teamwork Arts, to say a few words. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful evening. I look forward to seeing you all in the Pink City, Jaipur, in January. Thank you.
As a lover of books, I really appreciate JLF. I love JLF. I come here every year. I attend sessions.
The people, the vibrancy, the amount of different topics, the panels, the hospitality, the culture, everything. It's wonderful.
I feel a deep sense of satisfaction that the literary scene in India is so vibrant and so alive. We've had writers from 15 Indian languages and almost 30 international languages.
Jaipur Literary Festival. Is there so many brilliant things on at the same time that you can't choose what to go to? It's really fantastic. It's wonderful to be here.
for people to be able to just listen to the writers for what they're having to say and enjoy the festival.
It's a privilege to be here, and the diversity of the programming is great, and the standard of the debate is very high as well. We learn so much when we're on the panel, and we learn so much when we're in the audience too.
Absolutely live from Diggy Palace.
I'm coming from 2007. When I was 7 years, from that year I'm coming, and I love so much. I meet so many authors, and it's like amazing.
It's really good to see the Jaipur youth, getting so excited for this.
Passion of the people on stage. They're inspiring all these people, such an incredible turnout to listen to all these people.
I've come to this bookstore 4 or 5 times, and every time I walk away with another book.
I've been to festivals all over the world, but I've never been to a festival that is anything like it. It is more enjoyable, more exciting, more vibrant, and it's free.
It crosses boundaries and limits and heritages. And that is brilliant.
All the speakers, they made us so much clear and love for the literature more and more, and they updated us that what's the new upcoming, and I'm thankful to JLF.
And it's nice to see so many, especially young people, interested in literature. It's amazing to see how many of them just keep coming back and sitting through all the panels and taking down notes.
So it's a very great thing to have this festival in Jaipur. So we come here, we get a lot of knowledge, we can cluster our knowledge here. Around 6 sessions, and whether it's Samvad or whether in Charbagh, everything together. Isn't it wonderful for each and every one to experience this, especially the ones in school, to know that there is value in books and not always on the mobiles, sticking to it every time. Well, it is indeed the Kumbh of literature.
Very pleased with particularly how the performance poetry has gone. It's something I think we've been weak on in the past. We've had some very good sessions from the Arab world, some remarkable sessions from West Africa.
And what I love about JLF is that it makes space for poetry. Poetry is not often given as much time and love as it gets here.
Our duty, as we see it, is to bring the world to India and India to the world.
The only way to transform societies is through knowledge and through culture. And if you're able to make knowledge accessible to those who don't otherwise have access to it, that in itself is a great way of bringing about change.
Maro hello, hello ji maro hello, suno ji ramapi, aramdev ji maraji ki jai.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Asad, the Royal Opera House, Team Avid, for spoiling us and inviting us back year on year to launch and do this curtain raiser of the Jaipur Literature Festival. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our 2019 curtain raiser for the 2020 Jaipur Literature Festival. Even as the festival grows and spills over its banks and spreads across the world, all the way from Australia through to the UK and Ireland, Canada and the United States, and now from tomorrow in the Middle East and Doha, Qatar, what we're really most proud of is the fact that it has given inspiration to so many hundreds of festivals to come out and create platforms for all the wonderful writing that we see. Writing from across languages, irrespective of language, color, culture, citizenship, and everything more. The arts today is perhaps the last barrier to an increasingly right-wing world. It is the arts that can create a platform for thought, for action, for us to be able to understand that there may be many viewpoints, and all of these viewpoints can coexist. For all of you out there in the audience, artists, writers, musicians. Each day presents a new challenge to be able to find the much needed resource to be able to go forward. What other way can civilizations understand and be able to progress if it's not through the arts? And our appeal really in Bombay today to our corporate community is, please don't just look at it as a handout. Don't look at it as charity, but look at it as a service that we need to do for our next generations. It is culture that binds us together. It is culture that gives us a foundation. It is culture that creates an identity. And each of this, in our very difficult world today, continues to help us move forward. It is from these that ideas spring. The Jaipur Literature Festival is known as a place for ideas. I remember Piyush Gupta from DBS once saying to me, Sanjoy, I come here to get 100 ideas which rejuvenate me over the rest of the year. We're also very proud that we have over 80% of our 500,000 audience who are below the age of 29. These are young people who come from all kinds of backgrounds from across India and across the world. They are the ones who will inherit this world. We have climate emergency, and our time may well be up. What we are leaving behind for future generations is a very difficult planet, a very difficult place. For those of you who think that the planet will completely dry up and finish, don't have to worry about the planet. It's been around for millions and billions of years, and it will continue to outlast us as a race. Whatever each one of us can do, individually or collectively, we need to do. It is platforms like this that allow for a coming together of ideas, science and technology, economics, philosophy, history. Because if you do not learn from history, you will commit the same mistake, and you will ultimately perish. I say all of this not from a sense of being defeated, but from a sense of being renewed. As we look into the next decade, I think each of us must renew our commitment to be able to help each other, come together as humanity must, empathize with those who don't have what we have, look to the benefit of those people who do not access a Royal Opera House gathering. Each year, our festival directors put together a magnificent program bringing together speakers from across the world, primarily to make sense of the present, to give a perspective of the past, and envision the future. Please welcome festival directors Namita Gokhale and William Dalrymple to share the program for 2020.
Dear friends of books and literature, it's a joy to be back here at the Royal Opera House for the preview of our 13th edition. Our vision for 2020 is one of inclusivity, bringing together literary excellence and interdisciplinary conversations from around the planet. We are, as ever, plural, diverse, and multilingual, representing over 35 languages, including 14 from India. In fact, over the last 13 years, we have represented all the 22 Indian languages in their rich magnificence, except Bodo, where there was a cancellation one year, so we'll score 22 on 22 another year. Before I share the highlights of this year's festival, I'd like to weave in a thread of personal narrative. As a writer, I keep writing, keep trying, and I have done 18 books. And I believe it's best to write about the things one knows about. And now I've turned to what I know best, this beloved festival that has been such a transformative element in my and so many people's lives. So, my 18th book, Jaipur Journals, is a novel set against the backdrop of the Jaipur Literature Festival. It is where my different lives meet, but more of that later. Let me take you back to our Vision 2020 and what's in store when, once again, the world visits Jaipur and Jaipur visits the world. As usual, all of you who turn up at Digi Palace will inevitably complain bitterly about the difficult choices to be made between the stellar sessions in the different formats, in the Darbar Hall, in the front lawn, in the Charbagh, between Williams' programming and mine. Some of the sessions I'd like to mention would be on the great Rajasthani folklorist Vijay Dandetha and his timeless tales from Marwar, because we are rooted in the state of Rajasthan. We look at Sanskrit as a living language. We look at Beethoven variations to mark the 250th anniversary of Beethoven's birth, to the Darjeeling Express, where the Michelin chef Asma Khan, who has an all-women kitchen, she celebrates food and friendship. We have Sonali Bendre's book club to spread the word on books. We have the famed Anand Giridhar Das take on elites and plutocrats. It would be fun to have in Mumbai, I think, but let's see what he comes up to in Jaipur. We have Shobha Day on urban life again. We have Makarand Sathe on Marathi theatre. We are honored to welcome Madhur Jaffrey back to India to tell us about her incredible life. We have Francesc Miller sharing the Japanese secret of ikigai, of happiness. We have Jan Stoklasa talking about his best-selling book, which picked up Stieg Larsson's archive and rewrote it. And we have Guy Gunaratne and Ben Judah talking about rewriting London, the new London of today. We speak of Premchand ke phate jute to evoke the most loved and revered of Hindi writers, Munshi Premchand. The Katha Sarit Sagar, the Sea of Stories, takes us to the fantastical tales that were possible inspiration for the Arabian Nights and were themselves excerpted from the lost Paisachi language centuries and millennia ago. There's a special focus on women's writers from the Northeast and on poetry from across the world, from both William's list and mine. We raise a joint alarm about the climate emergency and about the rage of the rivers as they devastate our urban landscapes. Marcus Dussetoy raises the fascinating paradoxes of artificial intelligence and creativity and the next generation of AI writers. We look at tech horizons and the next billion users. Magsaysay awardee Ravish Kumar returns to speak at Jaipur, as do Javed Akhtar, Vishal Bharadwaj, and Prasun Joshi. And we are absolutely honored to have Nobel laureate Abhijit Banerjee be with us again. Guest speakers from our editions around the world will be joining us in Jaipur again. Our literary perspectives have been deeply enriched by our interactions at JLF editions at the British Library in London, as well as Belfast, Houston, New York, Boulder, Colorado, Toronto, Adelaide, and this coming week, Doha. These collaborative enterprises allow us to meet writers strong and huge and famous and from the very grassroots, and to feel the throbbing pulse of the literary imagination around our planet, and to share them across continents and cultures. In fact, it could be said that the sun never sets on the Jaipur Literature Festival anymore. Thank you for being here with us. We'll enter the new decade with the excitement of books and ideas, dialogue and debate, and set off on another rewarding pilgrimage of the mind of spirit. So, until we meet again in Jaipur, as I'm sure many, many of you will do, thank you.
Each year, as we spend more and more time in front of our screens and on our phones, I think the value of live human presence increases. it's one of the reasons that this festival has grown in the extraordinary way it has. In the last 14 years, since we grew out of a segment of the Jaipur Virasat Festival, this festival has grown to be the largest literary festival in the world. Our audience of between 400,000 and 500,000 people is as large as Glastonbury and Woodstock combined. Because I think we're sort of living in it and are used to it and are with it every day, I think the scale of this extraordinary phenomenon is sometimes forgotten. There's nothing else like this in the world. And the thing that's most extraordinary is that thanks to the generosity of our sponsors, many of whom are here tonight, who keep this going, because this is a free festival. There's nowhere else in the world where you can hear a whole waterfall of Booker Prize winners, Pulitzer Prize winners, Nobel Prize winners, Sahitya Akademi Prize winners, speaking for free to anyone who wishes to turn up. Whether you're a rickshaw driver or the CEO of a major company, you can just walk in and have your life enhanced by this extraordinary phenomenon. There's nothing else like it in the world. If you were at the Hay Literary Festival, you'd pay £300 to hear a Nobel Prize winner. Here, any student can walk in. And the thing that moves me most is the way that when you go down to the Jaipur railway station of an evening, you can see 500-600 kids just sleeping rough on the station platform. They've come from Assam or Tamil Nadu or Bombay or Gujarat. And they are there with their guitars, sleeping on rugs or whatever they've got, using rucksacks for pillows. And they're there to hear the writers. And we sell 100,000 books every year. This is a huge moment of book selling in India, apart from anything else. This year, Namita and I have worked on a program, and I think each of us is surprised by the fact that people just year after year say yes. We get about 70% acceptances, which I think is extraordinary. I mean, we always expect that one year people will get bored of us, or the people will start to say no, or they don't want to come back again. But they always say yes. And if they don't say yes, they say, I'm writing a book and we'll come next year or the year after. The focus in my list this year, the main theme is what I think has to be the big theme of the year, which is climate change, pollution, and the environment. We have the extraordinary David Wallace Wells, who has written, I think, probably this year's most extraordinary book on climate change. We've also got James Thornton and Martin Goodman, who together founded Client Earth, which is this extraordinary new legal company which sues polluters on behalf of the planet. And they've been doing this around the world with incredible effect. David Gilmour of Pink Floyd, I'm sure you've read this in the press, sold his entire collection of guitars earlier in this year to help fund. So that all those sort of dark side of the moon enthusiasts should turn up to support this. I think as a reflection of the dark times that we've are living in, there is an emphasis increasingly not on fiction in the programming, but non-fiction. And we have some extraordinary writers. The man, I think, the single writer I'm most pleased to have lured, I've been chasing him for 8 years, not quite the longest hunt I've been on. Margaret Atwood took 9 letters before she finally gave in. But this is Stephen Greenblatt, who's professor of English at Harvard, one of the world's greatest living Shakespeareans, and an extraordinary scholar of Renaissance literature, but one who importantly crosses over and can make his work incredibly accessible and exciting to laymen. His book, The Swerve, sat on the New York Times bestseller list for 6 months at #1. There are very few professors in the world who can pull off being incredibly scholarly, but have sales and popularity that sort of, of a Le Carré or a John Grisham or that sort of sales. We have his English equivalent, Peter Frankopan, whose book on the Silk Road sold over 1 million copies. He's here to talk about his follow-up, The New Silk Roads, which talks about the extraordinary Chinese expansion over the globe. We have a wonderful selection of historians. Anita Anand on Jallianwala Bagh, recalling the incredible music we heard from Harpreet earlier today. We have Brian Catlos talking about Andalusia, Bethany Hughes talking about Istanbul, Jonathan Phillips about Saladin, Hayley Rubenholt about the women killed by Jack the Ripper, Supriya Gandhi on Dara Shuko, Stephen Baker on Babur, Katie Hickman on Memsabs, and Frank Dicotta, a subject which perhaps is topical, on tyrants and dictators. We have a range of memoirists. We have Suketu Mehta, best known for the wonderful Maximum City, about this wonderful metropolis. Laura Cumming, who's written an extraordinary book that's won a whole raft of prizes this year, on the disappearance of her mother just after she was born, and the terrible family secrets that she uncovered when she investigated this. We have Peter Hessler, the New Yorker Pulitzer winner, who we have incidentally more Booker winners and Pulitzer winners than ever this year. One of them, Peter Hessler, has written an extraordinary book on the Arab Spring, particularly vis-à-vis Egypt, called The Buried. We have Asni Stierstad, whose books on the bookseller of Kabul was an international bestseller around the globe, but who's coming to speak to us about the massacre of liberals by Breivik, the fanatic in Norway 5 years ago. We have many of the world's greatest journalists coming. Lindsay Hilsum is here to talk about her acclaimed biography of Marie Colvin, the extraordinary woman war correspondent who first lost one eye while covering the Tamil Tiger conflict, then was killed finally in Assad, Syria, by a government strike. We have Catherine Eban talking about the scam in the pharmaceutical world. We have Dexter Filkins talking about Afghanistan and Iraq. Peter Bergen on Trump's generals. Anand Gopal on post-Trump Afghanistan. We also have some wonderful fiction. We've got Leila Slimani, who won the Prix Goncourt in Paris last year, on sex addiction. We have Elizabeth Gilbert, best known for Eat, Pray, Love, but talking to us about City of Girls. We have Howard Jacobson, the Booker winner, on his latest novel, and John Lancaster on dystopias. We have an amazing range of biographers, perhaps reflecting the change in world politics. A lot of them are about right-wing strongmen. We have Tom Segev, the leading liberal Israeli writer on David Ben-Gurion. Yung Chang from China talking about Mao's women. Benjamin Moser on Susan Sontag. And a trilogy on the great Indians of the turn of the century, Patel, Savarkar, and Krishna Menon. We've got a lot on technology. We've got some wonderful writers on art. B.N. Goswami speaking on the Mysore Bhagavad Puran, and William Fever on Lucian Freud. And finally, we have an extraordinary lineup of performance poets. My favorite, and the person I would recommend anyone to see, is the extraordinary Ethiopian-British poet Lem Sisay, who I first saw in Ireland this summer and who I know is going to be one of our most extraordinary headliners. But we have two Pulitzer-winning prize winners, Paul Muldoon and Forrest Gander, Simon Armitage, the British Poet Laureate, and Ruth Padel. And finally, we have the wonderful Lisa Dwan doing her one-man show on Samuel Beckett. It's an extraordinary lineup. Everyone has said yes. They're all there for free. All you need to do is book your ticket, book your hotel room, and turn up at Jaipur, 23rd of January to the 27th of January at Diggy Palace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, William. Thank you, Namita. We have the pleasure of inviting on stage Shinjini Kumar, the Country Business Manager and Managing Director, Consumer Bank, Citibank, India. Shinjini Kumar.
It's not fair to call a mere mortal banker on stage after William Dalrymple has spoken. But here I am. And I'm going to pick up from where William started, which was about the value of the live human interaction as our interaction with technology keeps increasing. And I think JLF is all about that. It is about the live human interaction. It's largely intellectual, as we all know, but it's also emotional. If you've been there since the beginning of it and you've seen the festival grow and become what it has become, which is pretty amazing, both in terms of scale and in terms of what it does to us as living, thinking beings. It is also sometimes funny. I remember a poet friend who was very flattered because he saw a large darbar hall full of people waiting for him, only to realize later that they were all waiting in advance for the next session, which was a Sonam Kapoor or someone. So it's a great occasion to be there. It's also aesthetically very pleasing, because I remember going there in winters, and for a Bombay person, you go to North India in winter and you see all these amazingly dressed people, and it's very, very visually appealing. The performances are great. The sessions are wonderful. So welcome to all of you at the preview. And I'm sure many of you are already planning to be there. Many of my friends who could not make it here have been sending me messages saying, see you in Jaipur. So I'm sure many of you will be there. I just want to close. I don't want to stand here between me and between you and the session, but I want to welcome all of you. And I do want to just say one thing on the live human interaction, that at City, that's exactly what we've been trying to do. We want to use technology to make your life easy so that we can focus on the live human interaction, so that we can spend time with you at events like this, at venues like this, together, caring for things that you care for, and bringing that into what we do on an everyday basis. So welcome to the JLF curtain raiser, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shinjini, and thank you, Citibank, for supporting us. And Shinjini, thank you for all the work that you've been doing in translation. That truly is your calling, so I hope you're going to continue that, and Citibank is going to throw lots of money to continue to support literature, most importantly. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and Asad to release Namita's new book, or forthcoming book, The Jaipur Diaries. Come. And Shinjini.
थे तो घरा पदा रो पीव हो रे बदाई मैं क्या दिलूं तो पर पल पल जमारूं केसरिया
Namita is going to introduce the book, and then we'll be in conversation for a few minutes.
I feel a bit strange pushing my own book, because for 13 years, all one has tried to do is push other people's books. And people often forget that I'm a writer, and I myself forget it and put that in the back burner, because what I'm able to do in curating and getting writers to be in conversation with each other is always much more important than any one individual book. But here, it's a different one. My new novel, Jaipur Journals, is set against the backdrop of the Jaipur Literature Festival. It's about the writing life, and why writers are obsessed with finding some pattern and design amidst the unstructured chaos of the lived life. I believe, and I don't know how many of you will agree with me from your own experiences, that each of us has two novels inside us. One is about the life we have lived, and one is about the life we might have lived, we could have lived. Each of us has these two life scripts, the experienced and the imagined. which, when scrutinized, they make us observe and understand our own lives and those of others around us. That is why reading and writing fiction are such powerful and transformative experiences. So my novel, which is not out yet, there's just the cover to give you a feel of it, and if anybody wants to pre-order on Amazon, etc., etc. But I'll walk you through the characters in my novel, just 2 or 3 of them, to show their backstories and their inner creative lives, because each of them has a very different compulsion to write. This novel begins with somebody called Rudrani Rana. Rudrani Rana is in her 70s. She's unmarried, fierce, cussed, stubborn, lonely. She carries her unpublished novel about with her in a canvas tote bag, too proud and much too vulnerable to ever share it, ever to show it to anyone. And I know many of you will know people who have a manuscript in the bottom drawer which they wrote and rewrote, but never dared to show to the world. And often these books are real works of genius, but they just don't see the light of day. Rudrani Rana came to me as a fully formed character. She just took over the narrative. She was a character, and suddenly the novel was a lot about her. Usually, I forget the plots and characters of my novels the minute I finish them. It's a sort of instant amnesia. It's like I'm told that one forgets the pain of childbirth, and it is true that after the child is born, you forget those throes of labor. In the same way, I forget even the names of the characters I've written about. But this person, Rudrani Rana, refused to get up and leave. Perhaps because there was so much of me inside her, or her inside me. So I'll give you a short little passage to give you a sense of Rudrani. This is how the novel begins. There's a train to Jaipur, and she is sitting in it. The train to Jaipur. As it hurtles along the track, 12-year-old Anura observes the woman on the seat beside her. She's old as Anura is young. She has fallen asleep, and her head tilts over to one side, almost falling off her neck like a broken lampshade. She makes low, whistling sounds as she snores. Her long hair is loosely braided and tied into a bun by what looks like a knitting needle. Now, I'm getting older, we are all getting older, but the writers are getting younger and younger. And there is a mutual incomprehension. At least the young have an incomprehension about the old. Anura is only 12 and a writer herself. Young people, millennials, sometimes don't seem to understand or comprehend that. As we grow older, as one grows older, the pain, the fight, the spunk, they get more rather than less intense. For writers like Rudrani, the telling of her own story is the rewriting of her story, of asserting her power over her own narrative, of taking her life back, at least in words. To me, she exemplifies the soul of the writer. She's creating her own version of reality and carrying it with her in her bag with the novel in it. That is why, after all, that we write fiction, to bend the narrative of our lives, to make it dance on a sunbeam. Then, here, there's a passage about why she writes. Why had she written it? Why had she spent a lifetime brooding over this story, adding and deleting from it, rendering it all but recognizable as hers? Even as she tried out more and more disguises, different pitches of ventriloquist voices. X in the novel was surely her mother. Rudrani had given her protruding teeth and a horsey laugh to hide who it was. That was enough, she felt, to hide from the world that X was actually her mother. Why was Rupert Murch so true to life that the character lacked even the freedom of fiction? She had written him to draw away from her broken heart. His story was like a scab, an armament against past and future pain. And then there was Rupert's mother. This is all the novel which she carries. We don't hear much more about the novel besides these hints about it. Rupert's mother, Zed, was the paradox of the piece. The character who broke through her boundaries to become the central figure in that story of interrelated lives. And indeed, many of you, if you read a novel and there's one character who holds center stage even though the story isn't about them, this happens again and again. And Rudrani Rana, she was in the shadow of every line, every hope and despair and consolation. Her book, opens like this: "My body remains a haunted house." That was how her book opened. What would happen, she wondered, if her book was published and read? She would have revealed herself, made herself naked. No, she assured herself, unsubmitted would remain just that, her private masterpiece, all the more precious for being hidden from the world. So that is Rudrani Rana. I hope you do meet her or writers like her in your life. My second favorite character in the book, and maybe Sanjoy and I will talk about how this character entered the novel, is a thief, a cat burglar called Raju Srivastav Betab. Raju Srivastav is the son of a tailor master, and he is an accomplished lone ranger who goes at night and takes money out of the most unexpected places under the CCTV cameras and guards, and he has a hidden wall in his bathroom behind which all this money is hidden. Let me tell you more about Betab. The story of Betab's birth as a poet began with demonetization and the stack of 1,000-rupee notes he had put away after a recent successful haul. It began with a well-executed burglary. It was the 8th of November 2016. There was a chill in the air outside, as was to be expected after Diwali. Pollution levels had spiked, as they always did at this time of the year. Raju Srivastav had been idly switching channels when he chanced upon the announcement that changed his life forever. Prime Minister Narendra Modi appeared on the screen. He looked grave, yet somehow breathless with excitement. Raju's phone was ringing, but whoever was on the other side was unable to get across. In the midst of all this confusion, he heard fragments of Modiji's speech. Raju switched his phone off. From midnight tonight, 8th November 2016, 500-rupee notes and 1,000-rupee currency notes will no longer be legal tender. It took some time for these words to sink in. What was he saying? What sort of joke was this? So that is how Betab then converts it. He goes to a kabhariwala called Baba Dada Sadarangani, and they come up with this scheme of transforming the money that he has stolen into making a best-selling book which he prints and buys back, and he becomes a very famous Urdu poet. But Betab does find his poetic voice at the Jaipur Literature Festival, and fame and fortune deservedly follow. And he recites before Javed Akhtarji, who's not here just now, but in Jaipur I will make Javed Akhtarji recite the poem that is transformative for Betab. There are other writers in my novel whose lives collide and intersect. There's the feminist author Zoya Mankotia, who writes out of conviction, but has to find the courage to question that conviction. There's Gayatri Smith Gandhi, an academic. She doesn't really have a story to tell, and I can't tell you how many of such authors I meet in Jaipur, who are not writers but want to be, but they don't know their story. But she just has the overwhelming desire to become a writer. And she too has her moment of awakening when she throws her manuscript into the Mansagar lake. I want to live love, not write about it, she told herself. Life, not words, she said again loud this time. The spiral-bound manuscript would dissolve and disintegrate. The ink would become one with the water. The paper would become pulp. Only the plastic spiral binding would remain, its skeletal presence like the vestige of some ancient marine life. So that's enough about words, but these are words and stories and writers which I have observed over the festival, and thank you for my patience in listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Namita. At every festival, once your curatorial work is done, you sort of sit on the sidelines, perhaps in the shadow and the half-lights, observing. And many of the characters in Jaipur journals actually just spring out, and I can I figure who's who, etc. Tell me, is that where the inspiration for this book has come from?
My editor at Penguin Random House kept putting this line in, writers, the loneliest of tribes, and I kept cutting it out because actually writers are not lonely anymore. They're always in the middle of a lit fest. But yet, it is a lonely life to struggle with a story which is your own and which is not your own. and to tell it, and then to be vulnerable enough to share it with the world. And, you know, in the festival, as you may have noticed, I never sit in the front row. I sit somewhere in the 7th or the 8th row to the side, and I watch both the audiences and the speakers. Writers are very lonely people. Yes, it's true. And I spend the rest of my time in the author's lounge, watching out for them. And another thing I've observed is that when, because writers are not performers, even performers get stage fright, and musicians, I don't know, but writers, before they go on stage, they are quite different people. They are cranky, they are anxious, they are difficult to deal with. And then when they finish their session, they just are the nicest people in the world. Often. Not always.
I'm not sure about that entirely, but hey. Namita, I think the most amazing thing about the book is that you have a writer who is not sure about whether her book will ever be good enough to be published. And she goes around protecting it till at one fine moment she just hands it over to a complete stranger. Why did you find the stranger to become the sort of affirmative point at that?
Well, I didn't plan the story, it just happened. And I knew somewhere when I began the story, all I knew was that there had to be a mean and malicious person, a writer, or a mean and malicious woman who wrote anonymous letters. I won't give away the story too much. And then I had this image. There is actually, if I may give away this secret, which you know very well, there is one sort of man who has been coming to the festival every year. And he's convinced that he's a genius. We are not so sure, you and I. And
we meet many such.
And I feel, and yet he is very intelligent. He has flashes of brilliance. It's just that he's not somebody I can put on stage. And I did once and it didn't work. And there is so much bitterness and hurt inside those people who have dedicated their lives to putting something on paper, leaving some track in the world of what they thought, what they felt. But they have the courage to expose their vulnerability, or else they don't have the circumstances to enable it. And so here, that moment came. She met somebody who, like her, was an outlier, who was an outsider. And she trusted him. And two outsiders met. Many, many people meet in the lawns of Diggy Palace. Old lovers, new lovers, agents, publishers, enemies, and she meets him and she recognizes something in him, so she just decides to give it to him. And indeed, it becomes a best-selling novel, as we know, but I've been told not to give the story away, but I don't see why I shouldn't.
Old lovers, new lovers, you were the essential, quintessential bad girl when you first wrote Paro. Is some of that sort of revisited in Jaipur journals?
Well, when I wrote Paro, I was 26, so it was easier for me to be bad. It's not so easy to be bad as you grow older. You can be mean and bad, but it's difficult to be fun and bad, if you know what I mean. But yeah, there is, if you're saying if there's sexuality in the novel, there's always sexuality in all that we do, and there is various sort of ways of doing this, of reaching out in our bodies and our minds and our emotions. And in fact, I had thought of calling it Between the Covers, the book. But then, yeah, we called it the Jaipur Journal. So,
a little while ago, sitting outside in this somewhat muggy December Bombay evening, you said to me, one of the reasons I write is because I don't sleep. And that's one of the reasons you actually caught a burglar in your house. Which is not quite in the story, but I would love you to share that as our closing sort of tale.
Well, there's a burglar in the story, and I've been obsessed by this burglar who entered my life 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
He's called the potty burglar, by the way. He does
I'm not going to tell the whole story. Oh, you want me to tell all the way?
The whole story. It's not in the book, so tell the story.
Okay, so, yeah, I was sitting up at night reading. I always leave one lamp on because I never know when I'll get up and start scribbling again. And so there was a lamp on, and I was asleep, and I thought I heard some sound, and I went back to sleep. Very difficult to get into sleep mode. And then I heard the sound again, so I got up, and I noticed that the door was open. and a sort of a hat stand that had 20 handbags hanging on it was no longer there, and the door was open, and without a second thought, I walked out. And I saw a man sitting in the little courtyard behind my room, going through all my bags. And it was very frustrating for him, I think, because all he found was homeopathy pills and pages of novel notes.
And many bags. She's a bag lady, quintessential.
And instead of quickly locking the door and calling the police, I, being a sort of foolish Pahari woman, went out and I said, "Aap kaun hai? Kya kar rahe hain?" And he was startled because he was not used to women coming out and accosting him when he could actually have killed me or whatever. So he was so startled that he just slipped out. And I can never forget that moment because he was a cat burglar. And when he slipped out, it was like ballet. It was like dance. He was the most graceful man I had ever seen. He actually walked on air and silently disappeared. So I said, this man is a genius. And what a boring life to just sort of do this every night. And anyway, and then I called the police. And before I know it, our local beat police, Mr. Meena from Rajasthan, had caught him. And it turned out he was Delhi's most famous cat burglar. And he was called the Dehshat of Delhi. In golf links and all the rich areas, he had the residents go on strike because the police hadn't been able to catch him. But Mr. Meena caught him because when he left, he was so startled by me that he left his awzar, his whatever screws and whatever things he had to open the doors behind. And so he came back at night. I saw him peep in. And he tried to come back and get them because they would give him away. And when he was leaving again, he called him. And now this is the potty story I have to tell you. Though I don't see why I should be telling you this.
Must. Stories are for sharing.
If anybody wants to hear a funny, dirty story, they can. Hands up?
Yes, go for it.
So the thing is, Mr. Meena is this determined policeman. And he's caught him. And he's holding him hard. And this man, of course, has oiled his body. And he's holding him around the stomach, waist, you know. And this man takes off his trousers, slips them off like a cat burglar, and he says, "I am going to shit all over you." And Mr. Meena says, "No problem, I will not leave you." And then Mr. Meena came to me and said, "I'm not become a hero." So we got him covered in the newspapers. But I always felt very, very sorry for this poor burglar who I had so rudely interrupted. And I told the policeman who came, and he got angry. He said, "Aap jaise NGO wale log, aap hi is desh ko destroy kar rahe hain. Chor ko pakadne ki jagah aap chor ke liye sari feel kar rahe hain." So he's a part of my novel. God bless him wherever he is, because we novelists are also thieves and we steal from each other's lives and stories. On that note.
So if you want to see much more or read much more of what Namita has stolen from real life, please book your copy of the Jaipur Journals, which will be released in Jaipur. Thank you very much, Namita. Thank you so much for this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to have William Dalrymple do the closing presentation. Thank you.
Forgive me for adding an extra part to this evening. You're probably all longing for your drinks, but I'll give you a quick run through my latest book, which came out last week, which is a catalogue of a show which opened in London last week called Forgotten Masters. And it's a book about the great Indian painters who worked for British patrons at the end of the 18th century. And these guys have never been shown before because they're sort of in between two worlds. Indians never claimed them because they work for the British. The British have never claimed them because they're sort of colonial artists. But they're some of the greatest natural history painters, some of the greatest painters of birds, beasts, and animals ever to have lived. And I know you're longing for your drinks and to get out of here, but I'll just give you a quick spin through just to end this evening. The first Indian word to enter the English language was the word loot. The word was unknown in Britain until the mid-18th century, when it suddenly miraculously entered English. And the reason, I'm sure, is obviously clear. From the 18th century onwards, large quantities of Indian artworks, money, and so on, found their way into Britain. You go to a place like Powys Castle in Wales, and you find in one room in the Welsh Marches, rising up from this gorgeous Tudor box hedges, more Mughal artifacts than exist in any single collection in India, even the National Museum in Delhi. And the reason, of course, is the East India Company. People in this country and in England still talk about the British conquering India, but the reality is much more sinister. It wasn't the British government per se, but the East India Company, which existed in this one house in Leadenhall Street. It's just the 5 middle windows. It's not even the 2 3-story buildings on either side. In that office, 35 employees, 100 years after the founding of the company, commanded a business which managed to take over Mughal India. The British, in 1599, when the company was founded, generated about 3% of the world's GDP. Mughal India, in comparison, which controlled not only, obviously, all of modern India, but also modern Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, generated around 30% of the world's GDP. And for the first time in history, India had overtaken China as the world's leading industrial producer. And this was what the East India Company came to take advantage of. And it made no pretense about being about bringing civilization or democracy or railways or any of that 19th century cant that you get about empire. The East India Company, like Goldman Sachs today, existed entirely to make a profit. It was the huge misfortune of this company to be taken over not by a government that even had a fig leaf of trying to pretend that it was about the country it was taking over, but instead was about generating maximum profits for its shareholders in Britain. The East India Company soon built about half the London docks. It generated about 700 clippers a year, trading everything from the largest narco operation in history, moving opium from Bihar to India, to China, buying tea in China, which it then sold not only in India and Europe, but in Boston. And it was East India Company tea, which was dumped in Boston Harbor at the beginning of the American Revolution. But alongside all this, there was an extraordinary discovery by British patrons of Indian artists. And I'm going to hope that this is the Boston Tea Party. And this is the East India Company flag, which was copied by some small colonial power that rejected Britain in the 1780s with this stripy white flag. But alongside all this, you get figures like John Wombwell here. John Wombwell was a Yorkshire chartered accountant. But as you can see, by the time this picture was painted, he was greatly at home beside the River Gompti, wearing a jama and turban, smoking a hookah. And the same thing was happening in reverse with the first generation of North Indians to come into contact with the company. This is a picture of Ashraf Ali Khan. He was the leading dealer in saltpeter in Patna in the 1760s. But look, he's, as well as wearing his pajamas and this wonderful cloak, he's sitting on a Georgian chair, sitting cross-legged on the chair with his jutis on the floor and his hookah resting on a Georgian teapoy. And at the time, that would have been considered equally remarkable to Wombwell heading in the opposite direction. And here is Ashraf Ali Khan's girlfriend, Muttabi, who is actually sitting correctly in a chair, showing her husband where to get off, but she also has her teapoy with the hookah resting upon it. And this mixed world where cultures were interacting in both directions is reflected in the art of the period. And this is probably a picture of Mazhar Ali Khan, or certainly one of the great Delhi artists of the period. And he's sitting in the normal Mughal position for painting miniatures. He's sitting on a bolster. He's leaning back. He's got one leg raised, and on that is a board, and he's painting on that board about 6 inches from his eyes with a single squirrel-haired brush. But if you look carefully, he's begun to take on several features of the new European world around him. He's wearing glasses, and in his box on the left, as well as his Mughal oyster shell pigments of ground lapis and malachite bound together with gum arabic in the oyster shells in the middle of the picture, he's also got a box of English watercolors sitting in the chest to the left. And he's using English watercolor paper. So the artists of the time are adapting. And this is the same with another of the great artists of the period, Yelapa of Vellore. He's sitting on a tea chest. You see the two chocks keeping the tea chest at an angle so he can paint on it. He's got his oyster shells on the floor, and he's got his English watercolors on top, and he's painting on watercolor paper. But look at that proud self-portrait that he's painting, the way his gaze meets ours. There's absolutely no apology in that picture. He's very much facing the viewer, and he's fully in control of his life. Now, this world these two worlds begin coming together with this man, Claude Martin, in Lucknow. Martin was a defector from the French Compagnie des Indes, who joined the East India Company, but he also worked for the Nawabs. And he built this extraordinary house on the left, in the middle of Lucknow, called the Château de Lyon, which was mainly reachable by boat. And he created this Enlightenment salon, where you had men like Antoine Polier on the left, who built was the engineer who built Fort William in Calcutta. You had Zoffany in the center, the only Royal Academician who was also a cannibal. On his way back from India, he got shipwrecked, had to eat several sailors to survive. Here's Claude Martin and his friend Mumwell. This is the guy who we first saw in the turban sitting by the river. Now, these guys were very interested in Mughal painting. They were fascinated by what was going on. But Claude Martin was also a man of the Enlightenment. He subscribed in Lucknow to all the leading Parisian and European journals of science and botany, ornithology. When he read about the Montgolfier brothers putting up a hot air balloon in Paris, he got a detailed description of how they'd done it, and he did the same in Lucknow only 10 years later. When he felt a very severe stomachache, he looked up a medical journal that had been published in Paris, and he operated on his own appendix. So he was an extraordinary man. And he imported in 1760 17,000 sheets of watercolor paper from England. And he began commissioning Indian artists. He also got a book from Paris called Les Oiseaux de France, a big book of French birds published in the 1760s. And this was the period that Linnaeus in Sweden was beginning to name the names of plants, and there were books being published of birds and beasts, and plants were being named. Botany was a huge passion in Britain and France. And he brought one of these illustrated scientific books of the birds of France, and he showed it to Mughal artists, and this is the result. You have a bird painted with all the precision of those Mughal painters, painting with a single squirrel-haired brush, but it's on now a white background. Some of his images are not. This is a picture of an adjutant stalk, and you can see it's painted like he used to paint, Mughal artists used to paint noblemen against this sort of Lilliput landscape of miniature trees. But he also painted cobras and an amazing selection of water lilies. And in the research for this show, we discovered 5,000 previously unrecognized, unpublished, and unaccessioned Claude Martin natural history pictures in the Kew Gardens Herbarium, which had never been seen before, and they're now available in this book and in this exhibition. And this flame passed to Calcutta, and there the early Scottish botanists commissioned men like Bhawani Das to paint mango leaves. Vishnu Prasad, who was a Mughal painter, used to painting Durbar scenes in Murshidabad, to begin painting these extraordinary and incredibly beautiful images of botanical specimens. And they are images of considerable skill and refinement. These beautiful colors, this incredible detail that you get with Mughal paintings. Look at this one with just 4 remaining petals on this opium poppy. A club moth. This is Munalal, again a man trained to paint Durbar scenes of Mughal noblemen. But here, look at this picture plant. It looks like a slightly erotic Robert Mapplethorpe picture of an orchid from the 1980s. Wild ginger. And then what do you do in the south? If you're a botanist and you want Indian painters to paint incredibly detailed, accurate pictures of botanical specimens, but you don't have Mughal court artists, who do you go to? The answer is you go to the only artists there are there, who are the chintz and the kalamkari painters. And this is an example of that. Rungia was an artist who'd worked in chintz. And you can see it's much flatter than the Mughal work. It's got no 3 dimensions, but he's taken his tradition of taking these tendrils for little waltz into the corners and filling the spaces. None of these images have ever been seen before. They're all on show for the very first time. Incredibly detailed images of seed pods, of so on. And then this woman arrives, Mary Impey. She's from Witney in Oxfordshire. Her husband is Sir Elijah Impey, the Chief Justice of the new Calcutta Supreme Court. And he's constantly involved in the politics of Warren Hastings, Calcutta. So what does Lady Mary Impey do? She gets down 3 artists from Patna, Sheikh Zainuddin, Bhawani Das, and Ramdas. And she gets them to paint her menagerie. And these are large images. These are about 6 foot by 5 feet. They're almost life-size. Incredibly beautiful and incredibly refined. A rather Disney-looking pangolin. This Malabar giant squirrel, Pahari Chua, it says in the Urdu. And these storks and cranes, as delicate as anything ever done by Chinese or Japanese artists. And the extraordinary thing is these have never been shown before. These are the first time they've ever been put up in a public exhibition. Pelicans. There's a whole sort of nature program by David Attenborough in here. You start with the cocoon hanging from a branch on the left. It turns into a caterpillar, then a moth, and then the bird looks hungrily at it. You can see all the leaves eaten by the caterpillars, little holes in them. An Indian roller, a black hooded oriole. But what British artist would ever dare to paint that brilliant mango yellow and to reflect it in the tree trunk? These are images, some of the greatest natural history pictures ever painted. This looks like it should be attached to Sigourney Weaver's face. Some terrible science fiction movie. It is, in fact, a horseshoe crab. There's snakes. And this wonderfully well-endowed bat, this very male bat, looks more like a Venetian commendatore about to usher a woman into an opera house. Very appropriate for the place we're in now than an animal in a colonial menagerie. But again, what you get the impression, these are actually portraits of animals. They're not just pictures. The artists managed to feel and understand and convey the characters for these birds. This is the male bat's girlfriend, and this presumably is the mother-in-law. We have lizards, we have catfish, pufferfish, incredible flatfish. Do you see in the top picture on the left-hand side, 2 eyes and a nose, a little mouth? And this is an artist called Haluda. And what we've tried to do in this show is give and research these artists' names. Up to now, they've been dismissed merely as company school painting, and the pictures have always been anonymous. But we've tried to research who these artists are, what their lives were, where they were from, how they developed. And Haludar was this sort of prodigy who worked with the 18th century equivalent of a rotary pen and does these minutely detailed pen and ink drawings of animals. And this is the essence of mousiness. These two Disney mice sitting incredibly well observed. And this bear that looks like it's stood on an electric current and all its hairs are up in the air. And then the signs of resistance in some of these pictures. This is Sheikh Mohammed Amir painting some colonial official's daughter. But if you look carefully, all three of the servants are given humanity and character. You could understand what they were like, but the colonial daughter is hidden entirely in purdah inside her bonnet. Now, what's going on there? Is this a Muslim artist not wanting to paint a woman's face? Is this a sign of respect to a colonial patron? Or is this the artist, regarding the intruder colonial daughter as somehow not quite human, as just a bonnet on a horse? We don't know. We can't. We can only speculate. We can look at these pictures and we can try to understand what Sheikh Mohammed Amir was doing. He was also looking at stubs. You can see these wonderful portraits of dogs and horses. The dog on the left is called General, and the girl on the right is called Aya. He painted colonial carriages with incredible refinement and precision. Colonial houses reflected in this pukor, with a stork on the right, and then this boatman fishing in the pukor on the hot, muggy Calcutta midday sun. And finally, we go up to Mughal Delhi, where there are these incredible artists painting the Taj. And there's both, again, Western and Indian traditions at work here. The delicacy of this is incredibly Indian, and yet the idea of doing an accurate architectural elevation is a British innovation. This is Deeg, the Qutub Minar. And in Delhi, you get the work of Ghulam Ali Khan, who is the greatest master of them all. He was the father of the Delhi school, palace-born, the descendant of Mansour. And he is employed by the British to paint architectural views as he was employed by Zafar to paint court scenes. He works for the Nawab Judger, painting him going for a ride on his tiger, as one does in the middle of an afternoon. And he paints Ustad Himat Khan, who was the kind of Keith Richards of the Mughal worlds, who was the blind sitar player of Zafar's court. But despite being blind, he managed to impregnate one of Zafar's main concubines, which was no small achievement for a blind man. And he got exiled to Hyderabad strategically in 1856, and so was the only member of the Delhi Gharana to survive the massacres of 1857, and kept the Delhi Gharana going. And then we have the wonderful dancing girls. This is Pari Khan Khanegi, who would still cut a dash in Housecast Village if she turned up in this outfit today, and these fantastic bell-bottoms. This is her great rival, Malagua, this chilly beauty with this wonderful dupatta. And Kandabaksh. This is William Fraser's manservant Kala, shown on the left as he emerged out of the fields of Haryana with his dirty turban and dhoti. And this is how he looked after a blow-dry and a bit of a wash and a haircut on the right, in a nice Napoleonic outfit and this sort of Shaivite hat. But you get the whole of Delhi shown. It's very democratic, this painting. You get not just noblemen and lords and high officials. You also get sadhus, soldiers, villagers, either in their dhotis or in their recruiting for the army in their army outfits. And this is the first time we see Indian villagers. These are instantly recognizable Haryanvi types who today would be out on the election circuit, no doubt. And, here they are in their dhotis, captured by Ghulam Ali Khan. We also get the toffs. This is the Ajit Singh of Patiala. Afghan mercenaries hiring their service. Look at this guy. It looks like sort of Arnold Schwarzenegger about to go into some terrible Terminator movie. He's got three swords a pistol, a bow, arrow, quiver of arrows, 2 more swords behind him, a shield. He's all set for action. And here his rivals, the recruits to Skinner's horse, again all dressed up in their white. And this is William Fraser's girlfriend, who's called Amiban, and his daughter. So in these images, we get these incredibly detailed images, not of noblemen and courts, but of the ordinary people of Delhi. And it's by the end that the whole thing begins to ebb away. Sita Ram, for the first time, is an Indian trying to paint in a Western fashion. He's looked at the work of the Daniels and the Hodges, and with this moment, although he was a great master, he's copying the picturesque and romantic images of mid-Victorian scene genre painters. And with his work, you begin to feel the end of this Mughal tradition. By the time that Val Prinsep turns up in Delhi to paint the Great Durbar in 1877, he tries to find the traditional artists, but finds they're all just copying the work of their forebears. And this is the end of a tradition of painting which has been unbroken through from Ajanta to this point. So the exhibition, Forgotten Masters, is on at the Wallace Collection in London from last week. It'll be on until April. If any of you are going there over the winter, please have a look in. And the book is now available. So thank you very much.
William, thank you so much. That was really lovely. Thank you. Can I please invite my colleague Preeta Singh, President Teamwork Arts, to come and conclude the evening.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here as we unveil the magic of the Jaipur Literature Festival 2020. You've just heard William and Namita share with us the amazing books, writers, the kind of conversations that we hope to have in January next year. All this has helped Jaipur Literature Festival over the past 12 years. It's our 13th edition next year in 2020. Become what it has. It's actually quite amazing for people who haven't been there. I urge you all to get there, because it's only when you really experience those few days, 5 days at Diggy Palace, and I'm going to add a 6th day just now and talk about it, because I believe we all look at the Jaipur Literature Festival as just one thing. It isn't. It's got a million moving parts. It's got something different for everyone. And we have audiences that come in. We have about 400,000 footfall. 80% is under 30 years of age. We have young people, young kids coming in from school, from college. And while that all adds to the numbers, and we are limited with our capacity to handle crowds, but we welcome them, because I think that is what the dream for young India, for us to be able to make a change, is by investing in these cultural interactions. And it's really a treat to see whether it's the Jaipur Bookmark, which is our business-to-business piece, which happens a day before the main Jaipur Literature Festival kicks off. Please, that's something that's really worth a treat. Even if you're not a publisher, if you're not an agent, come and listen to the conversations. That's where you see what's happening when Netflix is reaching out to authors from Indian languages to come up with rich content which they can convert into great entertainment for us. And that is really something that we're very proud of, is to take Indian literature in Indian languages, look at translations, look at how it can be monetized, how it can reach the world. When you look at the main Jaipur Literature Festival, that's another exciting piece that has grown over the years. Today we are in 4 continents, 9 cities, and literally, I mean, it's exhausting when Sanjoy comes back from yet another meeting and saying, hey, they want it here, and we're saying, hold on, guys. The reason why we say hold on is not because of what Namita and William can conjure and what millions of writers across the world can put out and what all of us are hungry to consume. It's really partnerships. How do you get this all out? In India, we're entirely free, and it's not just us. I also speak for a lot of the other festivals, which unfortunately this year had to close down because there was no support. There was no money for them, and I think it's dreadful. I mean, we've got enough millionaires and billionaires, and we've got, this whatever trillion economy that we're all going to. Why on earth can't we support, and why on earth can't we put money out for cultural endeavors like literature festivals? These are the safe spaces where lots of ideas can be discussed, where people from different political and social leanings can come in, religious leanings, and have conversations. And we must have them. So I really this year thank each one of the 70-odd brands, country brands, foundation brands, service, product brands, media brands that have helped JLF become what it is, present it to the millions that consume it, not just on ground in Diggy, but across the country and across the world. We have media from over 30 countries that comes in, covers the festival and takes it out to people. So it's really, when I pull back and I'm looking at the end of the day, we need cash. We need money to make the festival happen. We need lots of support and partnerships from individuals, and this is something which I want to share. I've just spent 2 weeks in the US where we were doing the festival. The number of individuals, wealthy individuals, not just of Indian origin, who wrote fairly healthy checks and said, here guys, we support the festival. Make more of this happen, because we do smaller versions there, 2 days, a day and a half. And it just gets me thinking that, here we are, it's our own literature, a lot of it. Why can't we put some effort out? Why can't we write that check? And I'm not just talking for JLF, I'm saying for the 80-odd festivals that happen across the country. So I thank each one of our partners, our sponsors, our well-wishers, people who put us in touch. And Shinjini is an example of what happened. We were wondering whether we should do Bombay or not. This has been a very tough year for all of us. Budgets have, come down. So she said, no, let's do this. I'd like our City Gold customers to come in. And these are the little opportunities which then become big and help endeavors like ours and many others to survive and thrive. So thank you, all our partners. I want to thank people like Diageo, Grover Zampa, many. I'm not going to mention them because you spend all evening. But it's with the help of all these brands and all these partnerships that we are able to bring JLF to all of you and to millions across the world. So thank you very much.